Hello, everybody. James Trim here. It's been a while since we have put out a YouTube video, and we should be getting those back out regularly again now. Much has happened since the last video. Um, one of the things, the last video I mentioned, I told you that we were losing our home. We have been forced to move, and we are now living in another home. So um, you may have noticed a slight change of scenery behind me. So I'm in a smaller study, a new, smaller study, new to me, um, and we are. It has been quite a process to find a new place to live, to move everything, uh, especially with my wife being chronically ill and disabled and not really able to help in that process very much. Okay, so on top of that, I have been manager, campaign manager, running a political campaign for a political candidate for state representative here in Texas, and that is now hopefully winding down. Super Tuesday is this March 5th, just a few days from now, and hopefully we'll win. And the worst case scenario I really expect is a runoff. If we do have a runoff, then I'll have 3 more months of work to do on that. But either way, I'll divide my attentions and make it work and get back to getting videos done. And today we're going to be talking about the 5 keys to the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. These were the original Jewish followers of Yeshua as the Jewish Messiah of Judaism. They didn't believe Yeshua came to create a new religion. They believed that he came to be the Messiah of Judaism, and they continued to practice Judaism and observe Torah with Yeshua as the Messiah, as a aspect of their Judaism. Okay, before we also will add, for those that don't know, the restoration of the ancient sect of of Nazarene Judaism has been my life's work for over 35, close to 40 years. Um, really, just about actually 40 years now. So, yeah, for the last 40 years, my calling in life has been the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. We'll talk more about that in future videos. Um, today we're going to be talking about the 5 keys that I have discovered to unlock the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. These aren't doctrines, they are informational aspects that have to be researched and understood in order to contextualize and understand what Nazarene Judaism and the original followers of Yeshua was all about. Before we get going, I want to remind everybody to like this video, share this video on social media, on Twitter or X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, on your Facebook page, on Facebook groups where it is a relevant topic, etc. All kinds of social media in which you participate in. Email the link to your friends that might be interested, and send it in private messenger to friends that might be interested. Okay, so share this video. Comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think about this video and participate in the discussions in the comments section. Subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell so you'll get notified when new uh, messages go out. Also, don't forget to donate. You can do that by through the donate link in the video description. You can now donate by PayPal, Zelle. We also have a GoFundMe page for our home crisis, and we'll be putting up a GoFundMe page for the restoration of Nazarene Judaism in the near future. So you can actually, my wife's hospitalization crisis still has a GoFundMe page, and you can donate there. Okay, so you can please consider donating to this work and this great effort to restore the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. No donation is too small, any donation will help. For those that don't know, my wife is chronically ill and disabled, and I am her caretaker at home, in addition to this great work of the restoration of Nazarene Judaism. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 keys to the restoration of Nazarene Judaism. These are 5 areas of study, I guess, uh, aspects that unlock the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarenes. The first is the direct references in the writings of the ancient so-called church fathers, and to a lesser extent, the rabbis in the rabbinic literature to the Nazarenes. Of course, uh, what I call the Ketuvim Netzarim, the so-called New Testament, which is not its really proper name. The Ketuvim Netzarim, or the writings of the Nazarenes, actually refer to them as the sect of the Nazarenes in Acts 24:5. Um, the so-called church fathers talk about this ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. Um, uh, Jerome gives a description of them. Uh, he gives 2 descriptions of them that deal with different aspects of them in his writings. And Epiphanius gives a very lengthy discussion of them in his Panarion 29. Of course, from their perspective, the Nazarenes were, of course, apostates. Um, and we have done videos, and we'll do more videos in the future on what we can learn from these historically from the church, so-called church fathers of Christianity, and what we can learn from the rabbis in the rabbinic literature historically, and other historic sources about the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. The definitive, excellent source on this is this book. I'm not getting I'm not doing an advertising segment or getting any kind of a kickback for promoting this book, but it's by Ray Pritz. And I agree with almost everything in this book uh, that deals with the so-called church fathers and the rabbis on the historically on the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. They get almost everything right, or he gets almost everything right. The only thing that he gets wrong is blatantly wrong, and it's actually here in the title, uh, where he uses the term Jewish Christianity, which is a contradiction in terms, and Jewish Christians. And in fact, even within the book, he quotes Epiphanius and the fact that, in fact, as a matter of fact, the ancient Nazarenes did not call themselves Christians, did not identify as Christians. They identified as Jews, and early Christians identified them as Jews. They were not Christians at all. They were not Jewish Christians. There was no Jewish Christianity as such in the early days, and I'm not sure that there really was. And the ancient sect of the Nazarenes was a sect of Judaism, and Gentile Christianity was a very early but later non-Jewish development. But virtually everything but that in this book is accurate, academic. It's an academic book, very well documented, and just about the definitive source on the Nazarenes. Okay, let's now talk about the second key to the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. The second key is the Hebrew and or Aramaic origin of the Ketuvim Netzarim, or the so-called New Testament. The New Testament was not, the so-called New Testament was not originally written in Greek. We've done videos about this in the past. We will do videos about it in the future. But the so-called New Testament was originally written in Hebrew or Aramaic. Now, unfortunately, some persons in Hebrew roots, in even in Nazarene Judaism, are at odds with one another over whether it was Hebrew or Aramaic, and some of them are um, almost think you're an apostate if you think it was Aramaic and they thought it was Hebrew, or if you think it was Hebrew and they thought it was Aramaic. I think there was probably some of both, just like with the Tanakh, the so-called Old Testament. The Tanakh was written mostly in Hebrew, partly in Aramaic. Much of the book of Daniel is written in Aramaic. Parts of Ezra are written in Aramaic. And of course, much of Jewish literature, ancient Jewish literature, is written in Aramaic. The Talmud is written in Aramaic. The Zohar is written in Aramaic. The Targums, of course, Aramaic paraphrases. So Aramaic does have an important part to play in Judaism. Um, and obviously, as does Hebrew. So here's the important thing. Hebrew and Aramaic are both written with the same 22-letter alphabet, although the Syriac dialect of Aramaic, there are certain dialects of Aramaic, including the Syriac version dialect, that are written with a different script, but they're still the same 22 letters as Hebrew is written in. And many dialects of Aramaic are written in the characters we're familiar with as modern Hebrew script. Okay. Hebrew and Aramaic are closely related Semitic languages. They have many of the same root words. Both are based on a set of three-letter roots. They share many of those three-letter roots. For example, the word camel in Hebrew is gamel. In Aramaic, it's gamla. Same three consonant root letters, a little bit different vowels. Same thing with the word shalom in Hebrew, shlama in Aramaic. Okay. So if all or part of the New Testament was written in Aramaic, that's still very Jewish. And if it was written in Hebrew, that's of course very Jewish. And if we have Aramaic manuscripts that are literal translations of Hebrew originals, then they're also going to look like they're going to have a lot in common. You'll be able to see the underlying Hebrew in the Aramaic, because Hebrew and Aramaic are cognate languages. I already said they share many of the same three-letter roots. They also share much of the same, so while they share much of the same vocabulary, they also share much of the same grammar. So Hebrew and Aramaic, there was a professor of Aramaic I once knew who would joke with his class, if you know Hebrew, give me 20 minutes and I'll teach you Aramaic. Okay, so the New Testament was not written in Greek, like the so-called New Testament, like the so-called Old Testament. It was written in Hebrew and Aramaic, or I'll say Hebrew and or Aramaic. And if you believe it was all written in Hebrew, we can get along. If you believe it was all written in Aramaic, we can get along. And we can have friendly and instructive debates about whether all or parts were written in Hebrew or Aramaic within the scope of Nazarene Judaism. And those are the kinds of helpful debates that we can have in trying to better understand these writings in the language in which they were originally written. There are parts of the so-called New Testament that doesn't make sense at all in English and only starts to make, or in Greek, and only starts to make sense when you look at it in Hebrew or Aramaic. So, one of the keys to understanding and restoring Nazarene Judaism is to seek to understand the Ketuvim Netzarim, the writings of the Nazarenes, in the uh, original Hebrew and or Aramaic in which they were written. And the ancient Aramaic, well, let's talk about Hebrew. We have Hebrew manuscripts. Well, we have Hebrew manuscripts for all of the New Testament, frankly, but many of those that we have uncovered uh, are reveal themselves to be simple translations from Greek. In some cases, interestingly, we have found Hebrew manuscripts that are probably Hebrew translations of the Peshitta Aramaic text. We do have manuscripts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Hebrews, uh, at the very least, thus far, that we have come across that appear to have to represent descendants of the original Hebrew of those books. We also have the entire, um, well, we'll say, we have the vast majority of the New Testament in Aramaic. We have the 4th century Old Syriac Aramaic, which is maybe older than the 4th century, which is it's the Old Syriac Aramaic text. Uh, we have two manuscripts, both of which are fragmentary, a couple of extra pages. Well, another page has been found fairly recently, but it doesn't have much new information, really, if any, uh, because it's a page of material we already had. While the two big major manuscripts that we have are fragmentary, missing a lot of pages, between the two of them, we have 95% of the Gospels. And we have two witnesses to a large portion of the four Gospels in this version. The Peshitta is a revision of the Old Syriac towards greater agreement with the Byzantine type of Greek text, but it does have its roots in the original Aramaic, and it's the we have the Peshitta text for everything but Second Kepha, Second and Third John, or Second and Third Yochanan, Yehuda, and Revelation. We do have some possible manuscripts for Revelation in Aramaic, apart from the Peshitta. That's uh, needs more research at this point. We can also see, oftentimes, the underlying text behind the Greek text, and much has been written about this by such authors as Charles Cutler Torrey and R.B.Y. Scott and others. So we know from what Epiphanius says and what Eusebius quotes Hegesippus as saying that the ancient Nazarenes did in fact use Hebrew and Aramaic versions of the so-called New Testament, and especially the Hebrew version of Matthew. As a side note, within this key, there is also the issue of a document known as the Gospel according to the Hebrews, which is a gospel that is apocryphal. It is lost. We no longer have it in its entirety. We do have about 50 quotations from it in these writings of the so-called church fathers. A whole video about this lost apocryphal gospel in the past. It was used by the ancient Nazarenes. A slightly different version of it was used by the ancient Ebionites, who split off from the Nazarenes, and we did a video about the Ebionites in the past as well. So we have, as I said, about 50 quotations from it, and we also have a great deal of information, enough tell us that our book of Matthew is an abridgment of this book, and that our four Gospels, and particularly the three Synoptic Gospels, um, are descended from it, or used it as it was a source text for them. One of the aspects of restoring the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism is understanding the Ketuvim Netzarim in the original Hebrew and or Aramaic in which it was written, and understanding the fragments of the gospel according to the Hebrews which have come down to us, and looking to the original Hebrew and or Aramaic in which they were written. All right, let's move on to the third key. The third key is the relationship. The third key in the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism is the relationship that the ancient Nazarenes had with the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls. And we've done a whole videos about this relationship in the past. So this is just kind of a summary of this key. I want to emphasize, and we may have done a video about this in the past, but there has been an effort to undermine, frankly, the significance of this relationship, or to put a slant on it. There have been many attempts since I started work on the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism some 40 years ago, to hijack the effort and to put someone's personal agenda on that hijacking of the effort, with anything from vegetarianism to various forms of Ebionitism, etc., to try and combine and claim the Nazarenes and Ebionites were the same group. They were not, etc. Okay, so there are efforts to, for example, well, first of all, there's efforts to say, well, the Dead Sea Scrolls aren't Essene in origin. They're something else. And there are various efforts on that. But it's very clear, if you actually look at what Josephus, Flavius Josephus, and Philo in their descriptions of the Nazarenes, and you compare their descriptions of the Essenes, you compare their descriptions of the Essenes in detail with the content of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I've done. I actually put quotes right next to each other, showing their description, and that only the Dead Sea Scroll cult could fit that description. So the understanding the relationship between the original followers of Yeshua and the Essenes, i.e., the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, is a major key. Both groups call themselves the Sons of Light, for example, the B'nai Or. Both groups refer to themselves as the Way. Both groups quoted the passage in Isaiah about making a way for Yahweh as describing in the wilderness, as describing their ministry, the ministry of Yochanan the Immerser, the so-called John the Baptist, and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the ministry of the Essenes as a whole. We could go on and on and on about this relationship. We've done whole videos about it. Some of the key things that we can learn about it is the significance of Paul's use of the phrase "works of the law," and a lot of information about the ministry of Yochanan the Immerser. Some of the things Yeshua says about halakha, about his position on divorce, and is directly related to material in the Dead Sea Scrolls. His halakha against taking oaths is in agreement with the halakha of the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls sect, which were one and the same, of course. And we could, like I said, do whole videos. Okay, but one of the beautiful things, for example, is that when we compare the Damascus document with what Yeshua says about divorce in Matthew chapter 19, we actually get more insight into the reasoning. We also get from that document insight into the reasoning of Paul requiring elders to be the husband of one wife. We could just go on and on and on about the relationship that exists. So much so that some have taken this too far and imagined that the Nazarenes were Essenes. I imagine that there were Nazarenes that identified as Essenes, um, but Nazarene Judaism as a whole was not simply Essene Judaism. Nazarene Judaism as a whole was an unlikely combination of an unlikely reconciliation and unity of uh, elements of Essene Judaism and elements of Pharisaic Judaism. But nonetheless, because of that, a major key to understanding and restoring the ancient sect of the Nazarenes is to understand the Ketuvim Netzarim in light of what Philo and Josephus write about Essenes, in light of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and therefore in light of Second Temple era Judaism, and in this case, the Second Temple era Judaism of the Essenes. All right, the next key that I want to mention, the fourth key in restoring the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. Oh, let me back up on the Essenes real quick. Also, do not be led astray by modern pseudo Essene documents that have been produced uh, largely by people claiming to have channeled Essene documents or claim to have recovered Essene documents, but they can't actually produce them or never did actually produce the documents. Um, Among these are such documents as the Essene Gospel of Peace, the Gospel of the Holy 12, not to be confused with the fact that some church fathers refer to the Gospel according to the Hebrews by that name, um, and the Gospel of the Nazarene, INE, and other such hoax documents. I think there's one called there's a letter from on the crucifixion by an Essene or something. These hoax documents have surfaced from time to time, and they have nothing to do with the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism because they are false. All right. Let's get to the fourth key. The fourth key, as I said, the fourth key is the relationship between the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism and the Pharisees. The Pharisees, yes. Yeshua criticized the Pharisees, but he criticized them for the same things that they often criticize themselves for. For example, Yeshua criticized the Pharisees for hypocrisy, okay, called them hypocrites. But in the Talmud, the Pharisees are also called hypocrites. And nobody would say the Talmud is a non Pharisaic document or an anti Pharisaic document. When Yeshua criticizes traditions of the elders in Matthew chapter 15, in reference to the calling that the Korban issue in relation to making oaths and keeping oaths that might dishonor our parents, the halacha that he arrives at against what he calls the traditions of the elders agrees with the position that we find in the Mishnah and Talmud. Okay, when Yeshua was criticizing Pharisaic Judaism, it was much the same as the internal criticism that Pharisaic Judaism was making of itself. Paul said in the present tense, I am a Pharisee. The word Pharisee literally means to be separate. And of course, Paul encourages us, be you separate. Much of Yeshua's halacha and his teaching mirrors that of the school of Hillel in Pharisaic Judaism, which emphasized the spirit of the Torah over the letter of the Torah, and which centered around such things Hillel's famous dictum, "Do not to others what you would not have them do to you," which is so parallel to Yeshua's "Do unto others as you would have them do to you." Um, so there is a tremendous amount of parallel between the material we find in the Pharisaic Judaism and in Rabbinic Judaism, which comes from Pharisaic Judaism, um, and Yeshua and his teachings. So, if we want to understand and restore the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism, we must understand Pharisaic Judaism and understand the Second Temple era Judaism of the Pharisees and how that relates to the Second Temple era Judaism of the Nazarenes. And all of this then helps us to understand what I have discovered is that the ancient sect of the Nazarenes were in fact a composite, an unlikely union of Pharisaic and Essene Judaism. In fact, there were uh, Nazarenes that identified as Pharisees, Paul being one of them when he said, "I am a Pharisee" in the present tense, and I think it was Acts 23:6. Okay, so we need to understand the Mishnah and the Talmuds, uh, the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. We must understand the Targums, the ancient Midrashim, um, and there's other things which we'll get into in the fifth and final key. Okay, so uh, again, we need to study and understand the rabbinic literature and, frankly, rabbinic Judaism to understand the Second Temple era Judaism, of which Nazarene Judaism was a part. Okay, the fifth and final key requires some explanation. This key is the key to the ancient Nazarene view of the three pillars of the Godhead and the Messiah as the middle pillar of the Godhead. It finds its parallel in Jewish Kabbalah. It's a concept that can be shown not only to have its parallels in the Ketuvim Netzarim and what may be known of the Nazarenes historically, but also in the writings of Philo of Alexandria, testifying to the Second Temple era nature of its content. I was first shown this material myself when I was studying under my mentor, Rabbi Moyal, um, who was an Orthodox Israeli rabbi who had become a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah. It was he who first showed me the truth on this issue. His testimony is in the video channel, a recording of his testimony in Hebrew with a translator in English giving English translation. Um, so we've done videos on this material before, and the concept of the three pillars of the Godhead, with the middle pillar being known as the Son of Yah, and this reconciliation of uh, the infinite Elohim in a finite form to man, um, in is what is the Sephirot in Rabbinic Judaism. It's also in the Zohar. It's also known as the Milah, or the Word, and it is also known as the Memra in the Targums, and in Philo, who wrote in Greek, the Logos. Um, so the concept of the Word and this middle pillar of the Godhead is called in the Zohar the Son of Yah, and in the writings of Philo of Alexandria is referred to as the Son. So the Son of Elohim, or the Son of God. Okay, he wrote in Greek, so the son of Theos in Greek, but he was a Jewish writer in the Second Temple era who wrote in Greek. Okay, he lived in Alexandria, Egypt, and that was his native language. As I said, we've done videos about that before. So that's a fourth major key. And to really understand that, it's helpful to grasp, getting knowledge of what Philo of Alexandria taught about these things in the Second Temple era, what we can find about them in the Zohar, the Bahir, the Sefer Yetzirah, etc., and how all of that meshes so well with the things that we read in the Ketuvim Netzarim, the so-called New Testament, and with statements that are made by the so-called Church Fathers about the beliefs of the ancient Nazarenes. So these are the five keys to understanding and restoring the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism, the original Jewish followers of Yeshua as the Jewish Messiah of Judaism. First of all, the historical references that we have to the ancient Nazarene. Oh, by the way, all five of these are in addition to the contents of the Ketuvim Netzarim. So, number one is the what we know historically about the Nazarenes from the writings of the so-called Church Fathers and from the rabbinic writings in reference to ancient Jewish believers in Yeshua as the Messiah. Okay, so the uh, the historical information, primarily in the Church Fathers, but also in the rabbinic writings, is number one. Key number one. Key number two is the Hebrew and or Aramaic origin of the so-called New Testament or the Ketuvim Netzarim. In other words, understanding the Ketuvim Netzarim in light of its Hebrew and Aramaic origin, or from its original Hebrew and Aramaic. And that also includes understanding the so-called gospel according to the Hebrews in the same manner. All right. Number three, understanding the relationship of Nazarene Judaism in context of the Second Temple era Judaism of the Essenes and the Dead Sea Scrolls as one of the roots of the continuity of Nazarene Judaism. It didn't just pop up from nowhere. It had continuity in Judaism and in the Judaism of the Essenes. It was not Essene Judaism, but it had many elements of Essene Judaism. Likewise, understanding the Ketuvim Netzarim, the writings of the Nazarenes, in light, and Nazarene Judaism, in light of their Pharisaic origins and their relationship to the Pharisees and the Pharisaic Judaism of the Second Temple era Judaism, and therefore between those two, understanding them as the ancient Nazarenes as a amalgamation of elements that had continuity going back to both Essene and Pharisaic Judaism, and understanding that Pharisaic Judaism of the Second Temple era is something that we can achieve through studying the rabbinic writings of rabbinic Judaism, the Mishnah, the Talmuds, the Targums, the Midrashim, etc. And the fifth and final key is the understanding the Messiahology concept, the nature of Elohim, and the three pillars of Elohim, with the middle pillar being the Son of Yah and the incarnate Word, as found in the Zohar and the writings of Philo of Alexandria, and how that meshes with what we find in the Ketuvim Netzarim. If somebody wants to say this material is late because it only shows up in the Zohar and they want to date the Zohar to the Middle Ages, which is debatable, then one can say, but we have the same ideas here in the writings of Philo of Alexandria in the first century, in the Second Temple era. And if one wants to criticize the writings, the relationship to the writings of Philo of Alexandria and say they're Hellenistic, we can say, but the Zohar and the positions in rabbinic Judaism and the Zohar and the Sefer Yitzra and the Bahir, etc., in the Jewish Kabbalah, they're not Hellenistic. They're mainline rabbinic Judaism, and therefore uh, 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 this overcomes each argument. And then one can't deny the fact that when we find this in Second Temple era Judaism of Philo of Alexandria and in the rabbinic Judaism of the Zohar, etc., and when we find these same ideas not only in both sources, but then that they mesh with the ideas that we find presented in the Ketuvim Netzarim, it's undeniable that these are the Jewish ideas that were the root of the ideas that we're finding in the Ketuvim Netzarim and in restoring the Nazarene Judaism and the understanding that the Nazarenes had about the person of the Mashiach and the middle pillar of the Godhead and the Son of Yah uh, as the middle pillar of the Godhead, and the Word, the incarnate Word, the concept of the Word, the Memra or the Milah of the Targums and the Zohar. Okay, so those are the 5 keys that help us unlock the restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. The 5 keys that I've spent the last 40 years studying to work on unlocking this restoration of the ancient sect of of Nazarene Judaism. It's been my life's work. I believe I was called to this work, and I hope that many of you will find that calling as well to this restoration of the ancient sect of Nazarene Judaism. So before I close, I want to remind everybody to please donate to this work. You can do that by sending donations by PayPal to donations@wnae.org, or you can click on the donate link in the video description. Also, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to share this video with your friends. Don't forget to comment and participate in the video discussion. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to click that notifications bell, and you'll get notified when new videos come out. All right. So until next time, everybody, shalom.